The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Julian Assange at the very top, and photos of those who have been in support of him around the world, engaging in rallies and vigils and demonstrations. Winter soldiers, as Tom Paine would say, and definitely one of the most fundamental elements of this movement, if it's going to be successful. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico, Assange Countdown to Freedom. Now, I have something special today. Last year, before I went to London to witness the first half of the extradition trial in Belmarsh, we interviewed Cornel West, and it was a spectacular interview. What happened though was I thought I was only going to get 10 minutes because that's all I asked him for was like 10 minutes. And I had two other guests that preceded him. Cornel ends up very generously rapping with me for like 38 minutes, 39 minutes, and it was just unbelievable. It was a real education for me. And he was on at the end. So there was an hour that transpired before we got to our headliner. And Kelly Lane, who's the editor and my producer, has been since March, said, why don't we put together a video and just let it be a standalone. So that's what we've done, a very special interview with a lot of pictures and video clips from that interview. It's just Cornel West, and it's worth the price of admission, folks. You got to watch this. It was really well done. So we're going to play it. We had a lot of Paul Robeson music throughout that hour and 50-minute extravaganza back then. So there's going to be Paul Robeson music, and it's the interview exactly the way it went back then, but it's by itself, and it was really special. So we're going to get right into it. This is Paul Robeson singing "Coming Home," and then we'll get home with my man, the great, my brother, Cornel West.
Just going home, quiet like some still day. I'm just going home. It's not far, just close by, through an open door. Work all done, care laid by, going to fear no more. Mother's there expecting me, father's waiting too. Lots of folks gather there, all the friends I friends I
Oh, boy, I'll tell you, last night, it was like Christmas Eve when I was a kid, couldn't sleep because I wanted to get up and I wanted to open up those presents because I had Cornel West on today. That's the feeling I had last night. I couldn't sleep at all. Cornel West, what can I say? Trying to do a terse bio, intro for Cornel West, it's like trying to come up with a terse bio on the entire catalog of the Library of Alexandria. You just can't do that.
Need a full show just for that.
No, you need take me 2 weeks. Forget about it. Cornel West is not only the preeminent civil rights leader in this country, he is also the preeminent civil rights activist. And let me tell you, Cornel West is a combination of Frederick Douglass, Reverend Theodore Parker, William Blake, and John Coltrane, maybe a little McCoy Tyner there. What do you say to that, Cornel West, my good friend?
Brother Randy, love you. Man, I salute the work you and the others have been doing there. We want to keep in mind, our dear brother Stanley Aronowitz, he's sick now, and I've been praying for him, and I hope he pulls through. But I do salute you, Brother Randy, I tell you, my brother.
Well, Cornel, one of the greatest moments I've had in my life really was an 8-hour stint I did in a jail cell with you up in Harlem way back in 2011, protesting stop and frisk, Mike Bloomberg's conception. Those 8 hours were so edifying. Not only
we had a good time.
Yeah, I want to tell you something. Nobody was able to stump you on anything. You know that. We not only got a seminar from you on the abolition movement, but also we went into about a 2-hour recording session, every tune from the 60s, and people were trying to get, Cornel's not going to know this one. Everything from Curtis Mayfield to the Beatles to the Rascals, every song they threw at you, you knew the lyrics.
Oh, we were having a good time raising our voices, Brother Carl, Dick.
Yeah.
All of us together. The Brother Jim, Rentos, we had a time, my brother.
Yeah, that was the one tune.
It was a beautiful thing.
I don't know if I should do this, but there is one tune. Do you have that lined up? This is the one tune that really shocked me that you knew the lyrics to this because, you're a jazz critic. I mean, you know everything about jazz and, music, man. You know the history of music, but you knew the lyrics to this song, which I couldn't believe. Let's just play a second of it. All right, that's enough. The foundations. All right, that's enough. The foundations. I couldn't believe it. Seriously, you knew the.
No. Brother, I tell you, I'm just so glad that you still in the world raising your voice with courage, man. And I'm glad you mentioned the stop and frisk.
Yeah.
But you see now people are overlooking the ways in which Brother Bloomberg is a neoliberal gangster.
Yeah.
So that he actually, in terms of Wall Street, what he did to public education and 6 million young folk being stopped and frisked, rights violated, 1.8% of those tied to any kind of criminal behavior. You can't just wipe that under the rug and appear as if somehow you just grand progressive, you see.
Right. Now, absolutely. Let me tell you something. You know who my guy is, the same guy who I supported in 2016, and he sounds like this. I want you to know that we're going to change this country 100%. And we got to, the other day I saw you in Cedar Rapids. I do it the best, Bernie Sanders in the world. And I've got to follow Cornel West. Cornel West is going to introduce me. I got to follow this guy. This is not going to be easy. All right. I'm going to, I got to play. I took a 20-second pastiche from that speech from Cedar Rapids. I'm going to play it for you, man, because this people have got to hear, because I am supporting Bernie Sanders because he supports free speech. He supports whistleblowers. And dig what you had to say the other day if you haven't heard it.
Widow, the fatherless, the motherless, the oppressed, the poor. I don't care where you are, no matter what color, no matter what sexual orientation, no matter what national identity. You are precious, you are priceless, which means that a life in Libya, in Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and Ethiopia, a life in Guatemala. a life in Haiti, a life in Puerto Rico, a life in Tel Aviv, a life in Gaza, a life anywhere on the globe has exactly the same value.
Wow, that was powerful, man. That was powerful. The whole speech was powerful. So you're going around.
It's amazing that you got a copy of that, though, brother. That's the first time I heard a copy of that, man.
Oh, are you kidding? I've spent the last 3 days preparing. I read Hope on a Tightrope. All right, I read that book, Hope on a Tightrope, which is a great book. I'm reading that along with this new book on by Mullen on James Baldwin. And the reason why, the reason why I bring that up is because I know you visited Assange, and I was there 3 times. I know I was there 3 times. You were there with our good friend Tavis Smiley, great guy and a brilliant talent and journalist himself. But I was
indeed.
And so I was there 3 years ago, and he had posted Baldwin debating on Twitter, Baldwin debating William F. Buckley on Firing Line. And so we started talking about him. We started talking about James Baldwin. The last time I was there 3 times over a couple of months, and talking about you. He brought up the time that you came in there. And then it just kind of like morphed into a conversation about the civil rights movement, and then it morphed into the abolition movement. And I said to him, you know what? I said, this is an angle that you've got to play. You've got to play this angle, Julian, for PR purposes. You're a journalist, all right? You're a journalist. Let's go back to the abolition writers, people like Elijah Lovejoy, who went to Princeton Theological Seminary, right?
Yes, he did.
Right.
He did, and died in Alton, Illinois.
Yes, he did, by a bunch of thugs in 1837.
That's right.
His brother wrote a book called, did a bio on him, which I have the original copy of from 1838, Owen Lovejoy. And the other one was David Walker, was another journalist who was killed. He was poisoned.
I'm teaching David Walker next week in my class at Harvard. Appeal to the colored citizens of the world. It's one of the great statements, that the indictment of American and imperial treatment of black people, I tell you.
He said that slavery was worse in the U.S. than it was anywhere in the history of the human race. The conditions were worse. And so he was poisoned. And people like he and Elijah Lovejoy, I said, you know what, Julian? They're going after you right now. They're actually going after you. Why don't you make that comparison? And he stopped me. He said, that's a false analogy. He said that those writers back then only angered and got the rancor of people of the slave power and some of the merchants in the North that profited off of slavery, like Fernando Wood here in Tammany Hall and those Boston merchants. But the rest of the country supported people like Elijah Lovejoy. He says, what I do, everyone gets offended. You got the military offended, you got liberals offended, and you got the DNC leaks have offended the so-called center right, center left. And so everyone, he says. So is that a false comparison between Julian and the abolition writers?
Well, it's a wonderful question. Keep in mind, my dear brother, that the abolitionist movement on the vanilla side of town only had a few thousand folk. You had Quakers, you had Mennonites, William Lloyd Garrison, Lady Maria Child. It was always a very small movement. Now, of course, the abolitionists on the chocolate side of town, the slaves themselves, they wanted to be free, but they were locked in. No, but so it was small then. But I see, my dear brother Julius's point, though. I mean, the people who really want to stand up for truth when it comes to disclosing the crimes of the American empire, the crimes of American militarism, liberals aren't going to go that far. No, they don't have that kind of courage. They're not going to go that far. So he's right that it's a much smaller group that want to stand for truth when it cuts across the board, be it the U.S. Army, be it the truths of the Democratic Party, be it truths about the Republican Party. People who want to stand up for that kind of thing, I mean, good God, you're going to have Brother Glenn Ford, Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberly, Paul Street, the Counterpunch. It's just Adolph Reed. It's just a small group. Brother Randy, yourself, It's just a small group in the nation that want to stand up for that kind of truth because it requires such a radical indictment of the whole system under which we live.
I see. Well, let me ask you this. You were there for a couple of hours. You interviewed him for your radio show.
Absolutely.
And people know Julian Assange from his work, The Myth, and all of that. What kind of impression as a human being did you get in those 3 or 4 hours that you were in his company?
Oh, no. We had a wonderful time. We talked about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. It was very clear that Brother Julian is a person of very deep moral convictions, political commitment, that he was fundamentally committed to disclosing these truths, revealing these truths across the board. And, of course, he's a human being like anybody else, so I'm sure he's got faults and foibles. But what came across to me is that he was a genuine freedom fighter, brother, very much so. And I think that this kind of psychological torture that seems to be at play needs to end. I think that we need to cast another serious limelight on his situation, on his predicament and his plight. And I think there needs to be much wider and more intense support for him. I still stand very much in solidarity with my brother. And I'm so glad that your show is one that allows us to raise our voices to speak in this regard. And you know, Brother Randy, you and I in part just trying to put a smile on Brother William Cutler's face from the grave.
Right. And
his voice would be the same thing. Howard Zinn, the same way. You saw the interview probably we just did in the Boston Review.
Yes,
so,
I did see that.
10 years later. 10 years later.
Yeah.
Howard Zinn. We got to put a smile on Brother Howard Zinn's face as well. Same is true with Fannie Lou Hamer. Same is true with Ella Baker, you know.
Yes, all of those greats. I mean, there were so many. You know, Baldwin, of course. You did an interview. That transformation of Baldwin, by the way, politically, he kind of like this guy Beaufort Delancey, who introduced him to jazz. How he went from gospel to
Buford.
jazz.
Yes,
Buford, yes.
So the great Buford Delaney.
Yeah, that's it. Right. So.
He changed Baldwin's life when Baldwin was very young. You know, Brother Eddie Glaude has a new book out on Baldwin. You want to take
I got it.
Too.
I got it.
You got Brother Eddie's book.
Yes.
It's a masterpiece.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I'm reading that and hope on a tightrope at the same time.
Well,
you know, and the reason why I bring it up is the influence of jazz, the revolutionary spirit of jazz. Did that have the same kind of effect on you? Is that the?
Oh, indeed. And you know, Ed Pavlik's wonderful book on James Baldwin and the blues and jazz is also something to take a look at. He teaches down at University of Georgia. But for me, it was rhythm and blues. One, I come out of black church, so that I already had rich black music, across the board in the church. We used to have Sly Stone playing every fifth Sunday from Vallejo in my church. So you know,
wait, that's in California.
That's in Sacramento, and he's from Vallejo, Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacto. That's right, my brother.
That's it.
Absolutely.
I grew up in Southern California. I know you're from Tulsa, and this is.
Yeah, I was born in Tulsa, but I only stayed a few weeks.
Yeah. Margaret Ratner Kunstler, and her kids just got back because it's the 100-year anniversary of Black Wall Street there. A 100-year anniversary, which is something we don't know about. I suppose if Julian Assange was around, none of the newspapers really reported on Black Wall Street.
Oh, no. If Brother Julian was around, we would know the exact number of black people who were killed in that massacre. They still haven't counted the number of folk who actually were killed. They know 5,000 were run out of town. They think it was somewhere between 500 and 1,000 who were murdered, but we just don't know. And again, you know, you got the news sources and the authorities that be hiding and concealing the truth. Right. They don't want people to know. So, thank God for Brother Julius.
Right, absolutely. That's absolutely true. Margaret Kunstler, who says hello, and you interviewed her with Tavis Smiley.
Oh, yes. Send her my love and respect, brother.
Do you remember, in Tulsa, she said that she saw the remains of some of these homes that were bombed.
Yeah.
And she said, it was really eerie because all you saw were like steps. There was nothing else except for like the front steps. Exactly. Everything else was gone. And they're still discovering graves there.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's real, brother.
Yeah. Well, we didn't
That's
have.
very, very real.
That's the kind of journalism. If they had that then, if somebody had done what Julian does right now and exposed the truth,
That's right.
this trial that's coming up. Possibly he may be extradited to this country if the Brits get their way. The U.S. is hell bent on getting him here. And speaking of Mrs. Kunstler, I want to play this for you and how this not only relates to Assange, but other political prisoners like Mumia and like our Leonard Peltier and others, because there are countless in this country as well. But just take a listen to Bill Kunstler. This is just right after the conviction of the Chicago 7 or Chicago 8.
And that's the terrible myth of organized society, that everything that's done through the established system is legal. And that word has a powerful psychological impact. It makes people believe that there is an order to life and an order to a system, and that a person that goes through this order and is convicted has gotten all that is due him, and therefore society can turn its conscience off and look to other things and other times. And that's the terrible thing about these past trials, is that they have this aura of legitimacy, this aura of legality. I suspect that better men than the world has known, and more of them, have gone to their death through a legal system than through all the illegalities in the history of man. 6 million people in Europe during the Third Reich, legal. Sacco Vanzetti, quite legal. The Haymarket defendants, legal. The hundreds of rape trials throughout the South, where black men were condemned to death, all legal. Jesus, legal. Socrates, legal. And that is the kaleidoscopic nature of what we live through here and in other places. Because all tyrants learn that it is far better to do this thing through some semblance of legality than to do it without that pretense.
Your thoughts, Brother Cornell?
Well, that's my dear brother. That's your dear brother, brother. I love me some William Kunstler, man. I'm telling you, he's a truth teller.
Yeah.
He's a justice seeker. He's absolutely right. In the name of the law, people have been treated barbarically, atrociously, murderously. And we have to always have a Socratic suspicion of any rule of law tied to structures of domination that's violating the human dignity of anybody here and around the world. That's what Brother Kunstler understood. I remember I was blessed to have a dialogue with him on television one time, man. And good God, we had a good time together.
I got to travel with him when his autobiography came out in 1995. So we went from New York to Chicago to D.C. to Seattle to L.A. We were bombarded by the JDL. They were throwing rocks and tomatoes and eggs at the car. And it was really a great time. And he died later that year. His last public appearance was actually at Caroline's Comedy Club. I produced his show.
Is that right?
Yes. He went up there and he did like an hour. I'm going to send you the video. An hour. Dig this. 1 hour up there just telling stories about the Chicago 7 and everything else that transpired in his lifetime. And he got a standing ovation. And then he died a couple of weeks later. Irwin Corey was part of that as well. He was really a very special individual, as are you. You are just like the best. You are a combination. You're one of those guys I look at. I say, he's like one of those guys from like the Enlightenment, like Schiller or Jean-Paul Marat. I mean, you specialize, or you're so knowledgeable and done so much in your lifetime. 20 books you've written, you've edited 13. You're into philosophy, theology.
Well, brother Randy, though, man, we got to zero in on you. Do you know how rare it is to have such a profound comic talent that you have, tied to revolutionary spirit? As you know, going back to Aristophanes, so many of the comic people, they were transgressive, but in the end, they were still conservative because they wanted to restore the hierarchy, even as they poke fun at the ones at the top. Whereas your conception of comedy, you're able to disclose the incongruity, show the hypocrisy, keep the humanity, which is always part and parcel of the humor, and then join social movements for fundamental social change.
Wow.
I mean, that's a rare kind of move, my brother. I'm telling you right now.
Well,
as great as Eddie Murphy is, he's not a revolutionary.
no.
He's not part of social movements. He's just a tremendous, great comic talent.
Right.
So that to use comedy as a way that's connected to revolutionary change, you know how rare that is. Good, baby George in some ways, George Carlin had some serious analysis of power, and he's a tremendous comic talent too. But you see the connection I'm making. You know how rare that is, Brother Randy. I salute you, man.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do in life, Cornell, is, as you said, as bad as things are, it's been worse in the past. And so you got to just keep moving. I keep looking at this Assange case, and I say, my God, hope. Is there any hope? And then I looked at this video of you being interviewed in this James Baldwin Unpopular, and there was a little piece there, you talking about hope, the same way Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture last week, said, don't look for the light, be the light. Now, I'm just going to play this because I actually grabbed that sound clip from last week. Do we have that?
Having hope is still too detached, too spectatorial. You got to be a participant. You got to be an agent. You keep on pushing, Curtis Mayfield says. Be a force for good, Coltrane said. Mississippi, goddamn, says Nina Simone. That ain't having hope. That's being a hope. Courageously bearing witness regardless of what the circumstances is, because you're choosing to be a kind of person of integrity to the best of your ability before the worms get your body. Boom. That's it. That's blues. Beautiful tradition.
Wow. Can you expand on that a little bit about hope?
Yeah, I think that hope is as much a verb as it is a virtue. Hope is found in the moral motion, in the political movement, in the spiritual movements that allow us to keep our integrity intact, keep our soulfulness intense, and then connected to other people who are struggling for freedom and justice and radical democracy. And that can be enacted in arts, it can be enacted in science, it can be enacted in the laboratory, it can be enacted in the barbershop, enacted in the street, on the jail, in the mosque, in the synagogue, in the church. But it has that fundamental organic solidarity with those who are suffering.
Right.
That's what Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught us, and he's absolutely right. Hypersensitivity to the suffering of others catching hell in the language of Malcolm X, and our solidarity with them. And that's what you do as a grand artist, brother, and that's what I try to do as a writer and lecturer and speaker, man.
You do it all. Your books are great. I really love this book that I got just in preparation for this show, and that was Hope on a Tightrope, which was written in 2008. I know you have Democracy Matters and Race Matters and many other books. People can find you at Cornel West. I just have one or two more questions, Cornel. I want to ask
you. You take your time. Take your time, my brother.
Do I have time? Because I know you're running around doing a lot of things, including with Bernie Sanders. Is he going to let you do that much time with me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I got to get to California, Chicago, and then New Hampshire in the next day and a half, my brother.
Oh, my.
But I got time for you.
right.
I got time for you.
Oh, my God.
I can tell you that.
All right. Well, listen, I want to ask you about, here you have Assange, that he's in this country. There's a lack of support, even though all of his revelations, most of his work exposes white countries, white-led countries like the U.S. and the U.K., and their crimes committed in so-called non-white countries, countries of color, whether it be Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Honduras, you name it. And so I see a dearth of support amongst black leaders and black politicians and black media. What do you ascribe that to?
Well, when you go back to the 1940s, you had a major break in the black freedom movement between Cold War liberals who were willing to become well-adjusted to the American empire, even as they fought for civil rights. We agree with the fight for civil rights. Being well-adjusted to the American empire meant you didn't say a word about militarism, didn't say a word about imperial policies. Then you had the left expression, Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, Victoria Garvin. They were calling for decolonization of the third world, the support of resistance against the American empire, but also resistance against the Soviet empire or the Chinese empire or any other empire. And it was the second wave. It was the Du Boises and the Robesons and others who were criminalized and marginalized, so that the very notion of black freedom was dominated by Cold War liberal black folk. Well, you jump up now to 2020, coming through the 80s and 90s all the way up to Obama, you get Cold War black neoliberals.
Yeah.
Black Congressional Caucus and others. They won't say a mumbling word about the drones being dropped in Libya and Afghanistan and Somalia and Pakistan and other places. They won't say a mumbling word about the surveillance. They won't say a mumbling word about what Brother Assange is disclosing and has disclosed over and over again. But they will say something about voter repression. They will say something about civil rights. So they're part of that Cold War liberal, neoliberal strand rather than that more revolutionary radical strand that's concerned about militarism. That's why Martin King is so very important. He broke with the Cold War liberals and said, I have a critique of Vietnam. I have a critique of U.S. policy in Latin America. I have a critique of U.S. cooperation with the South African government. I have a critique of U.S. occupation of Dominican Republic. I have a critique of the way the United States is treating Haiti and so forth. So you get that internationalism that is pushed to the margins. And in 2020, those of us who were part of the legacy of Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, Victoria Garvin, Martin King, this is exactly what Juma Baraka is doing in such a powerful way with the Black Alliance for Peace, that they are representative of the Robeson and the Du Bois tradition in terms of having a critique of U.S. imperial power.
Wow. I got to tell you, bring up Robeson and others from his era that did stand up, and that would be Langston Hughes did, so did Wright? Richard, was it Richard Wright? Right.
Yeah, the great writer, Richard Wright.
Yeah, so they were, they were named, Orwell, named names, and all three of those were on a list that he gave to what was called the Information Research Department, which was a wing of the MI5 or MI6 back in the 50s. Orwell became very conservative and was naming names. And Robeson, just because we've been focusing our music today. We had Nina Simone, who I know you're a big fan of. You brought her up, Nina Simone. She was a rebel. Give us. And
she goes hand in hand with Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah.
Lorraine Hansberry, they were very close, very tight.
And Robeson. So give us, because most people don't know the kind of sacrifices that Paul Robeson went through, the kind of repression, basically, and the blacklisting. Just in a nutshell, give us a little bio on Robeson for those who don't know out there.
Well, Paul Robeson is one of the great freedom fighters of the 20th century, born in Princeton. He was turned down by Princeton University, Phi Beta Kappa, Rutgers, graduated from Columbia Law, went to Broadway, worked with the greatest American playwright, Eugene O'Neill, and then joined the revolutionary wing of the freedom movement. So he went all around the world. He fought with the Irish against the British. He was there in Spain, the Civil War against the fascists. He was there in Alabama. 1939, he was the most famous Negro in the whole world, having enacted Othello on the stages of London as well as New York. And by 1954, he's under house arrest at 4645 Walnut Street, living in his sister's house. He's unable to have any access to resources. His job is shut down. He visits Du Bois, who's also whose passport has been taken away in Brooklyn, and they work together along with Lorraine Hansberry and a few others. John Henry Clark's another great one there as well. So Robeson goes from being the most popular Negro in the whole world to being one of the most hated black freedom fighters in the American empire in a matter of 14 years or so. He dies in 1976, and very few people even knew he was alive, my brother.
Yeah, well, I know he was alive. You know,
we shall never forget him.
No.
We shall never, ever forget our dear brother, Paul Robeson.
Absolutely not. And there are other great singers of that era. Ethel Waters was one of the best.
Ethel, too. Yeah.
And
she and Harold Arlen.
Yeah.
That great Jewish brother from Buffalo.
Really?
Sondheim's favorite.
So
from Buffalo. He's the son of a cantor.
No kidding.
Son of a cantor. But when he wrote Stormy Weather, good God, let alone Over the Rainbow. You know, all the great songs for Wizard of Oz. But they were very close.
Yeah.
Ethel and,
right.
Harold.
Yeah.
Very close.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you, Cornell, I saw you actually started organizing protests when you were, so this is like, you've been doing this since you were a kid. Your mother was a teacher. How did you, in that part of the country, Northern California, Sacramento, not actually a hotbed for radicalism, how was it? How were you treated when you were organizing these protests back then?
Well, it was when Brother Martin got shot, though, man. We had to do something. We became part of a movement to make sure that they had black studies in all the high schools in Sacramento. So we had a massive boycott. We just shut down the high schools and said, if you're interested in the quest for truth, you're going to come to terms with the truth of the suffering of not just one side of the country, but the whole country. Black folk, indigenous peoples, white poor, brown poor, across the board. And that was the beginning of it. When I went to Harvard, worked with the Black Panther Party breakfast program, and prisons. I never joined the Black Panther Party because I've always been a Jesus-loving, free black man. I've always been tied to my own Christian faith, and my brothers and sisters in the Panther Party were secular brothers and sisters, deeply atheistic and agnostic. And so I was always willing to work closely with them, but I wasn't going to give up my religious faith to be part of any organization. But that was just the beginning of it. But it's a matter of just trying to be true to the best who came before, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you've done quite a job over the last. I've seen you everywhere. Here's a statement that you made. I think this is in Hope on a Tightrope. It says, "When ordinary people wake up, elites begin to tremble in their boots. They can't get away with their abuse. They can't get away with subjugation. They can't get away with exploitation. They can't get away with domination. It takes courage for folks to stand up." Do you remember singing that?
Yeah. No, indeed. It's like Sly Stone. Stan, you've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. Stan, there's a midget standing tall in the giant beside him about to fall. Stan, there's a cross for you to bear, things to go through if you going anywhere. Stan, that's Sly Stone saying stand. Yeah. Stand for poor people. Stand for working people. Stand for those Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth.
Yeah.
Stand with them, alongside them. Go down swinging.
Well, now I know why you know the lyrics to Buttercup. Because, Buttercup, you knew that. That's when Nixon was in Nixon was president. My fellow Americans, there's a guy by the name of Cornel West out there, and we're gonna have to stop him. Cornel West is a dangerous man. And then Reagan said the same thing. Reagan said, there's a guy by the name of Cornel West. I want you to get rid of him, all right? He's getting under my skin. So let's go get him now. I want to get back to Assange for a minute before we go. Cornel West, Cornel, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, they all want him. Why do they all want him?
Because he's a truth teller. He's a justice seeker. He's going to pull the cover, and has already pulled the veil of a whole lot of barbaric activities of those institutions. And the sad thing is, and this holds for Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, that it could be Obama or Bush or Trump, that when it comes to the war crimes committed in terms of dropping drones on innocent people or babies, or in terms of not wanting or providing cover-up for those crimes, that there's a consensus against my brother Assange of both parties. They don't want that kind of disclosure. And that's why what you're doing is so important, standing up with him. And that's why I always want my voice to be in solidarity with him in terms of his willingness to speak the truth, disclose the truth, and seek justice for all. You realize the crimes that have been revealed by WikiLeaks, there's been no accountability, no responsibility of anybody being in any way rendered a just treatment given the kind of crimes committed. Well, none whatsoever.
Nothing. And not the Democratic National Committee for what they did to Bernie in 2016. They probably, by rigging that election, cost the Democrats that election, because Bernie would have won in 2016. And all of these liberals are upset that Trump won, and they're blaming it on Assange. Aren't we better off knowing what the DNC did in 2016 and what it seems like they're trying to do again right now?
Absolutely. There's got to be transparency. But you notice now that the elites of the Democratic Party, they call for transparency all the time. But when it's time to enact it, when it's time to execute it, they pull back. Because those truths are too undermining of their claims, my brother.
That speech that he gave Bernie the other day, talking about the prison industrial complex, talking about the war industrial complex, military industrial complex, private prisons. He did the whole gamut there. The insurance companies. That was one of the boldest speeches I have ever heard in my entire life. I mean, that bordered on the speech that Martin Luther King gave, the drum major instinct. That kind of speech can get him in trouble, you know.
Well, he's been giving that speech all around the country. You got Brother Matt Dusk, who's been writing some powerful stuff for his foreign policy. You got Sister Nina Turner, who's been there from the very beginning. Of course, you got Sister Jane, his wife, who's an intellectual, like Nina on their own, and like Matt, all of them in their own right. That he's been giving that kind of speech shaped by the kinds of sensibilities, the visions, the analysis of all three of those and others. And that's one reason why his call for solidarity around poor and working people against Wall Street elites and against imperial elites in the military-industrial complex. Very, very important, my brother.
Yeah.
And this is true, as you know, in regard to the Middle East, in regard to our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Yes.
That he's not talking about any kind of anti-Jewish hatred. He's talking about a hatred of occupation, a hatred of Israeli occupation, a hatred of subordination of peoples, and an acknowledgement of the dignity of both Palestinians as well as Israeli folk. But you got to end occupation. You have to have self-determination in the region.
The elites, though, in the Democratic Party, people like Paul Begala, Neera Tanden, and Bakari Sellers, man. Where does he come off? Who is this guy, Bakari Sellers?
Well, you know, his father's one of the great freedom fighters of the 1960s, Brother Cleveland. Oh, he was one of the first to come out against the war in Vietnam, was working closely with Stokely Carmichael. But Brother Bakari's moved toward the center, you know, and he's now a he's a elite within the Democratic Party apparatus, and we got to keep him honest. Old brother Bakar, we got to keep him honest like anybody else.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, Cornel West, before we go, I really want to thank you because I said, can I get you for 10 minutes? And you've done 35, 37 minutes, and I really appreciate that.
But what you were doing is just so crucial, important, indispensable. And as you know, I've always wanted to be able to spend time on your show. I've been running here, running there, running here, and running here. So now that we get a chance, we just stretched out for 35 minutes or so, and I have enjoyed every moment of it, my brother.
All right. I'm going to, before we get into this Ode to Joy rendition by Paul Robeson,
Wow.
which was written by, it's an ode by Friedrich Schiller. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay, you knew that.
At the very end of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Yes, absolutely. And then the one we just played, Going Home, the music is by Dvorak, his Ninth Symphony. So before we go to that, I just want to get a closing, the peroration on behalf of our dear brother Julian Assange, who is inside one of the most disgusting, rancid, squalid prisons on the planet, and that is a place called Belmarsh. A little shout out to him because he definitely is going to hear about this.
Oh, and you tell my dear brother Julian, just like when I gave him a hug there in London, then I'm giving him a hug. I send my love, my respect, my solidarity. I want him to know that there's people outside who are pulling for him. I'm the Christian praying for him. And then I know it's tough. I can't even imagine how difficult it is. But you have a spirit inside of you. You have a strength. You have a resilience. You have a stamina that the world already has seen manifest. Continue to manifest that as we continue to support you to make sure that justice is, in fact, enacted for you, for your release.
Well, God bless you, my dear friend. And I can't tell you how important it is for you to be part of this show and to add your voice in support of Julian Assange. Really was a pleasure, Dr. West. And we're going to go out with Ode to Joy. You can stay on and listen to it for a few seconds.
Oh, no, I'm going to stay on and listen to it, but I support you, though, brother. Love you, brother.
I love you, too. We're going to play Ode to Joy.
Praise to Joy, the God-descended daughter of Elysium, ray of mirth and rapture blended, goddess, to thy shrine we come. By thy magic is united what stern custom parted wide. All mankind are brothers plighted where thy gentle wings abide. Freude, schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische, dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Fliegel weilt.
Beethoven with the lyrics by Schiller. And what a joy that was last year, that conversation, that dialogue with the great Professor Dr. Cornel West. Cornel West is now at the Union Theological Seminary here in New York, so it's good to have him in the neighborhood. I want to thank Kelly Lane, who has spent hours and hours and days putting this together. I know she looks at it as a labor of love, and so do I. I don't know what to say. I really can't follow that other than to say we're going to continue with our Assange series and also other issues here on Assange Countdown to Freedom that relate to justice. And once again, if you'd like to support us, and we don't make any money here, but if you'd like to support us, you can go to AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com, and we just pay the bills. Nobody's getting a salary here. And that's it. We'll go out now with a little more the great Paul Robeson, and I believe this is Jerusalem. See you soon. Thank you very much.
And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pasture seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bowl of burning gold. Bring me my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear, O clouds unfold. Bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my soul